All right, if you want to know everything about the 2026 Yamaha YZ450F, you have come to the right place because I have taken the secret handbook out of the Yamaha truck while we were out riding with them. Unfortunately, I'm legally not allowed to show you exactly what is inside of this, but I've recapped it all for you right here. Stick around, you're going to want to hear everything that's new about the 2026 YZ450F. All right, so to start things off, I'm honestly pretty surprised at how many changes this bike has for the new model year. We're still in this mid-generation, kind of at the end of this generation of the YZ450 that was introduced back in 2023 when it was all new. Now, each year since it's been introduced, they've kind of tweaked it slowly, new motor mounts and new suspension settings, kind of like the usual things that they do. But this is the biggest change that I think we've seen with the Yamaha 450 without making it an entirely new bike or changing the generation. Now, I think what really sparked this new change is the sound requirements that are coming down the pipeline from AMA, from FIM. They want to make the bikes at a 109 decibel sound requirement. And you've seen parts this year, like on Chase Sexton's bike with that big header pipe to really make the bike quieter. And that's kind of what that's coming from. So the manufacturers, the idea is you could roll up to a dealership on Friday night or even Saturday morning and buy a bike. And then the next day or that day, go to a race, an AMA sanctioned race, and pass sound requirements with a fully stock bike. That's kind of like why these requirements are coming down the line. So the manufacturers have to comply with that rule, right? In order for them to give a buyer the option to race a completely stock bike. So if my facts are straight, those rules have kind of been pushed back another year, but I believe it was intended for it to be implemented in the 2026 racing year. And that's why we see Yamaha coming to the table with the 2026 YZ450 with these changes. So what were Yamaha's goals with this new bike? Like I said, I legally can't show you what is inside of this information here inside our handbook, but I've recapped it all and tried to give you a concise version of what's inside. So let's get into it. They told us that they want a more controlled engine feeling with smoother power delivery, less intake noise, and an overall more connected feeling from the throttle to the rear tire. They added a hydraulic clutch, and hot take, is that the reason why Eli Tomac is leaving Yamaha? And the frame has also been updated for a more relaxed ride with less bump reaction and an overall more planted feeling. Now, those aren't my words. Those are straight from the Yamaha handbook. So how'd they go about doing this? To start off, the intake noise of the Yamaha is something that we've complained about ever since they switched to this forward-facing airbox design. It's loud and you need earplugs, and it's the most different bike of the bunch, of any of the manufacturers, simply because of that. As soon as you ride a Yamaha, it's so much more noticeable what bike you're on rather than the other bikes that have the airbox that's kind of behind the rider. So in order to deal with the sound, they've added an extra resonator and a duct at the front of the airbox to reduce that sound. And they've also updated the intake ports with steeper angles and a throttle body that really matches that new design of the intake ports. So all of these kind of go together for a more straighter shot and just to overall kind of eliminate a little bit extra sound at the front of the bike. On the header pipe, there's also a resonator to kind of eliminate a little bit extra sound. It's tucked right behind the frame. It's almost hard to see. And then the muffler also looks the same, but there's a new internal design with a new baffle to also reduce sound. And it's angled down 1.6 degrees while also being shortened by 50 millimeters. Now, if you have a 2025 model and you're looking to bolt some of your old parts onto the 2026, I do believe that the exhaust muffler will bolt on straight from a 2025 to the new 2026 model. Before even riding this bike, just moving it around to shoot photos and shoot videos, starting it up, that kind of rattly feeling that the Yamaha has, that sound, that raspy sound, was a lot reduced just right off the bat before we even rode the bike. There's also a new flywheel and a 51 tooth rear sprocket instead of the 49 that came on the 2025 model. And there's a stronger aluminum outlet pipe on the side of the cylinder over here. Before it was plastic, kind of prone to breaking, and a lot of aftermarket guys were doing an aluminum one. Now the aluminum one comes stock for the 2026 model. Yamaha's also added a Nissan hydraulic clutch for this year. The master cylinder over on the side of the bars definitely looks taller than some of the other Nissan units that we see on the Kawasaki or on the Honda, but their goal with this was to get the same pull feeling that they got from the cable clutch, but apply it to the hydraulic clutch for 2026. On the 2025 model, it came standard with a cable clutch, but there was an option to run a GYTR hydraulic clutch. Now the hydraulic clutch comes as standard and it won't accept the old cable clutch. So before you had the option of going cable to hydraulic. Now, because the cases are specifically designed for the hydraulic unit, you don't have the option to go hydraulic back to cable. The frame has also been redesigned, mainly in this down tube section from the steering head down to the frame cradle. The neck area of the frame is thinner by 5 millimeters, and the cradle is thinner by 5 millimeters as well. They've also removed a hole at the rear shock mount for added rigidity. And again, there's new engine mounts. They've changed this kind of every year since this bike has been introduced. It went from a one-piece design to two thinner two-piece design, back to a one-piece design, and then now we're back at a thinner one-piece design. Going from 8 millimeters, they're now at a thinner front engine bracket at 6 millimeters. The upper motor mounts are different from left and right side. The right side is now thinner at 4 millimeters, and the left side is thicker at 6 millimeters. With the new frame, there's also an all-new shock out back, and they've increased the piston size 4 millimeters from 24 to 28 millimeters. With that, you've got all new valving and more piston ports. You've also got a toolless adjuster for low speed compression right here on the shock, which now matches the toolless clickers up on the front fork. And then to match the updated frame and new shock, they've added new settings to the front fork. Still the KYB SSS fork that we love, and still the same finger clickers at the top. The plastics are all new. You can see that right away when you look at the 2026 model. And most importantly, you only need one 8mm T-handle to take all the plastic off. Before, you needed an 8 and a 10. There were some different bolt sizes. Now it's just one 8mm T-handle all around. The rear fender has also been redesigned. It has a different shape kind of now. You can grab it underneath the fender a little bit easier. Before, I feel like it was a lot sharper and thinner, and if you didn't have gloves on, it almost kind of hurt. Now it's a little bit thicker. There's more of a handle for you to grab on, for you to pick the rear end of the bike up. The seat cover is also all new for this year. It's a much different design as far as the seat cover. The way they explain it is it's easier to slide forward, but as soon as you go to slide back, it actually holds you in place a little bit better. I'm not a huge fan of the seat foam shape, but it's still the same shape this year. It's that thinner, rounder style, just a different seat cover material. Once again, you have Yamaha's Power Tuner smartphone app. You can change the power character of this bike, making it faster, making it slower, messing with traction control, launch control, all of those things that the smartphone app. I feel like the Yamaha is definitely the most user-friendly and easiest to operate. And then new for this year with the Power Tuner app, you have a ECU lock function. So if you choose to engage this, you can turn it on and you can basically not start the bike until the password is put in the phone. So kind of an extra safety feature if you don't want somebody riding your bike without your permission. A safety feature, if somebody steals your bike, they won't be able to start it if you have this mode engaged. The 2026 model in the standard team blue retails for an MSRP of $10,299. They also have a 70th anniversary edition with this cool white and red. That's going to be $200 more than the standard blue. And for 2026, this bike has gained 1 pound over the 2025 model, making it 241 pounds at wet claimed weight. All right, that was a lot to go through. I hope you guys are still with me. One thing you're not going to get out of this handbook is what the bike is like to ride. So let's get into that.
Hey guys, thanks for watching the latest video. If you're like us and you love riding dirt bikes, you know that there's a little bit of maintenance that goes along with that. MotorX has just launched their HYK series of oil change kits in a box. What that does is it makes it very easy for you to do an oil change on your Honda, Yamaha, or Kawasaki 250 or 450cc competition off-road or motocross bike. The oil change kit's gonna come with a pre-measured top speed full synthetic 4-stroke oil can. It has the exact amount you need to do your oil change. It also comes with a high quality oil filter and a new crush washer for your drain bolt gasket. Everything you need to do a fast, efficient, high quality premium oil change is in that box from MotorX. We like having a few of these kits on hand here at the Cycle News shop. It makes our maintenance really quick and easy. You can find these at motorx.com or hit up your local dealer that sells MotorX and tell them to get some of these in stock so you can have an easy oil change of your own.
So I've ridden the previous generation Yamaha, the 2022 model, the 2023 when it was reintroduced, and then all of the 23, 24, 25, and now the 2026 model. One thing that I always say when I describe the Yamaha, it's just straight up fast. And if you think about it, the manufacturers are tasked with kind of making a bike that has to fit everyone. So do you make a bike that's faster and able to detune, like through the Yamaha smartphone app, or do you take an approach like Kawasaki where you make it maybe a little bit slower feeling bike, a little bit more lethargic feeling, but you give the buyers an opportunity to turn the power up with their smartphone app? If you've seen our recent Kawasaki KX450 video, they gave us a new map through the smartphone and it totally changed the feeling of that bike. So it's kind of tough of what they go with. But for me, I feel like Yamaha has consistently brought a bike that's fast and they've given the buyer the option to detune it if they so choose. Now, in that same breath, while this bike is so fast, for me personally, I feel like it's almost been hard to ride. It's almost hard to hold on to. You have to respect this motor and respect this bike because it's so fast. For me, I feel like I can sometimes only do 2 or 3 laps on this bike without getting fatigued or getting tired while riding it. Over the course of a long moto, I want a bike that's easy to ride. I want to feel the same when I start the moto and when I finish the moto. Obviously, I'm going to be a little bit more tired, but I want the bike to be able to be controlled. Sometimes it's like when you ride a 250 or 350, you're more in control of that bike, right? And when you ride the Yamaha 450, it's like you really have to respect it and you have to know what you're getting yourself into because it's so fast. So luckily for us, Yamaha brought a 2025 model so we could go back to back and compare these two bikes head to head. So the track that we rode is really fast, really high speed, a lot of off cambers, and you're putting a lot of trust into the bike. You're trusting the side of the tire, you're trusting the suspension, and you're really, like I said, putting a lot of emphasis on that. And that was the first thing that really stood out to me while riding the 2026 model. Especially when I jumped back and forth from the 2025 to the 2026, I noticed how planted the 26 model was. It just felt really comfortable and predictable, and this wasn't something that I remember from riding the older Yamahas. It felt really glued to the ground, kind of something that I remember from riding the 2022 model, but not really something from the 23 and up. This new generation Yamaha has been really good at tight turns and tight twisty tracks, but maybe not necessarily as much on a higher speed track where you really want that high speed stability. And jumping back and forth between the 25 and the 26, the 25 I just felt was so much skatier and so much, not sketchier, but like I couldn't trust it as much without feeling like it was going to go away at any second or kind of toss me off, where the 26 just felt so much more planted and glued to the ground. It kind of felt like a little bit heavier in a way, but not in the sense that I couldn't move it around, just more like it was glued, like it was Velcro to the ground. And anywhere I put the bike, I never felt like it was going to spit me off or like it was going to go away or I was going to lose the front wheel or do a 2-wheel slide or anything. I just felt so planted and secure on this bike. And going back and forth, I really noticed it, so much going from the 25 to the 26. The 26 just felt so much more planted, so much more glued, and so much less sketchier than when I was riding the 25. This bike kind of blended that feeling that I wanted from the old bike of that high-speed stability and the old generation, 22 version. That's kind of how I felt on this bike. I had that long, high-speed stability matched with that new ability to turn in the tight turns that the Yamaha kind of didn't have before, but it has now. And now it kind of gave up some of that high-speed stability, but now the 2026 model kind of has that back, if that makes sense. As far as suspension changes go, I actually went 4 softer on the front fork, but 2 in on the rebound. So just to soften the feeling of the fork up, especially at the very top, going through these big, fast braking bumps, but also allowing the fork to kind of move in a lighter and more free feeling. I like a lot of front wheel feel, a lot of front tire traction. And when I put more weight on the front wheel, I wanted the bike to kind of work a little bit in unison with itself. And that setting was recommended to me by Travis Preston. It's something that he uses in his bike. He's a taller, bigger rider. And I feel like that kind of suited my riding style a lot more and made me a lot more comfortable on this bike. As far as the rear shock, we went in 1 on the shock compression and out a quarter turn on the high speed, taking that from 1.25 to 1.5. And from the clickers, 8 is recommended at stock. We went in 1 to 7. Kind of building on what I said earlier, the sound of the bike is greatly reduced. I've become a permanent earplug wearer in the last few years, and just sitting on the bike right away, you have less of that rattly, loud, gurgly Yamaha feeling that you get. Right when you get on that bike, you could be blindfolded and you would know exactly what bike you're riding. Some of that knocking noise is gone as well, and it almost sounds like a normal dirt bike when you sit on it. All these other bikes have the airbox behind you. They're a little bit quieter. The Yamaha is so noticeable that you're on a Yamaha. Whether you're on it or you're behind somebody, they can always tell what bike you're on, right? When you're sitting on this bike, it's definitely reduced and it's not as loud as the previous version was. This kind of builds on the overall motor feeling, which is just overall more controlled. That's like the best word I can think to say is you still have that nasty torque that you want from the Yamaha, but it's so much more linear and so much more controlled, right? Like the old bike, you have to respect so much. And as soon as you touch the throttle, it kind of wants to lurch and surge forward. Now the new bike is so much, it has manners now. Like you have a better controlled feeling and it's more polite to ride, right? Like there's still some jumps I was jumping in first gear, not really on purpose, but I noticed later on in the day I was hitting this uphill step up in first gear just because it had so much torque to it. And I think for a wider variety of riders, they're going to like this feeling of the Yamaha a little bit better. I always tell my friends, like, the Yamaha is so fast, but it's so almost difficult to ride, right? And now this bike is like, I feel like anyone that I know could jump on the Yamaha and still get that fast feeling, but still be in control. It still has that raspiness and that raw feeling that the 25 has and that the Yamaha motor is known for, but just in a much more controlled package. I think the mid to top end range is still the same. I think the torque is maybe curved a little bit smoother, but I still think you have all of that package. The best way I can say is, like I said, it just has its manners. It's more polite. It shows up to the table with its, no elbows on the table, but it's still as soon as dinner ends, it's still going to have that party mentality, right? Like, it's ready to go. But I think, like I said, it's going to suit a wider variety of skill levels and different riding abilities. Along with that, the fueling and the overall EFI function is so much cleaner. Like I said, as soon as you start this bike, it doesn't have that popping. It doesn't have that surginess that the old bike had. As soon as you touch the gas, it wants to, lurch forward. The new 26 is so much smoother. It doesn't pop. It doesn't gurgle. Not that there's any, performance drawback to that, but it's so much nicer to ride because of that. As soon as you get on the gas, it's so much smoother. Later on in the day, I actually put a more aggressive setting in this bike, which before I would never do. I would always take this bike and detune it. But now this bike, like, I can almost put a faster setting in and still feel so in control, and I'm able to run a 20-minute moto easy. I could ride this bike all day long, where before I sometimes felt like I could only do 3 laps before I'm like, dude, I got to get off this thing. Like, I'm going to crash. I'm going to personally like whiskey throttle or crash on my own. Now I'm like, I feel so much more in control and so much more comfortable on this bike in terms of the overall motor. With the hydraulic clutch, I feel like I've been so accustomed to riding a hydraulic clutch lately. It comes standard on the KTM, the Husky, the Gas. It comes on the Honda. It comes on the Kawasaki. I feel like Yamaha is like the only brand that was still running a cable clutch. And personally, I think I like a cable clutch more because you have such a fine point of engagement. Sometimes the hydraulic can feel a little bit more vague, and sometimes the lever pull is harder too. Like on some of these other Nissan units, like on the Honda or the Kawasaki, the lever pull is actually a little bit harder, I feel like. And the one thing that Yamaha really, told us before we got on the bike is like, we really wanted to make it feel like it was a cable clutch, the same lightweight feeling that they have. And maybe it's the lever design and how it feels a little bit longer. But I think if you blindfolded me, I don't know if I'd be able to tell the difference between the old cable clutch and the new hydro clutch. And like I said, I think I like a little bit more feeling of the cable, but on this track, we're not really using the clutch that much, honestly. So I didn't notice any real performance, drawback or gain by running the hydro clutch. And the feel to me felt the same. So in that sense, it wasn't a benefit or a drawback. I feel like it was kind of the same. It's kind of like an even draw, if that makes sense. But I don't think in terms of going to a hydraulic clutch, if you're a guy that's like, I can only ride a cable, I don't think you're going to be giving up anything by switching to this hydraulic clutch. Another little hot topic is that Justin Cooper has already been riding the 2026 model in the Super Motocross playoffs. Thought that was kind of cool that he already wanted to get on this bike. Him and Cooper Webb are running the hydraulic clutch anyways. I think Eli Tomac is the only guy still running the cable clutch, and we'll see how that ends. One big complaint I have with the Yamaha, and I thought they fixed this in 2025. I'm not sure why I still feel this in 2026, but these foot peg mounts, the brackets, I feel like I'm standing on them when I'm riding. You can see, I'll drop the video in over here, but you can see the edge of the mount kind of sticks out farther. And when I stand up, I'm trying to stand on my toes like everybody else is right now. When I point my toes kind of inward, I feel like I'm standing on the edge of this bracket right here. It's not a huge deal. I just kind of have to take a half a step out a little bit. And I've kind of trained myself now lately to stand so close to the frame and so close to the inside of the bike. So I don't know, just a little bit of a thing. I'm sure there'll be aftermarket options to easily switch this out. Another thing, just a styling feature, but I really hate this front end. I think the number plate and the front fender, I don't know why, it just looks so ugly. It looks so small for such a big, powerful bike. I just feel like it should, when you first look at it, it should look stronger and have a little bit wider front stance. Nothing obviously performance-wise, but yeah, just a hot take on some styling features. So overall, I do think Yamaha actually knocked it out of the park for 2026 simply because they addressed 2 of my biggest complaints. And that's the overall controllability of the engine and the bike's stability at high speeds. whenever shootout season comes around, I love riding the Yamaha simply from a performance standpoint. It's so fast, it's so powerful, but I often have to detune it and make it smoother just because it's so hard to ride for a long period of time. But now with the 2026 model, I feel like I could easily knock out a 20-minute moto and ride exactly how I was at the start that I am at the beginning. I don't feel like it's beating me up. I don't feel like it's getting sketchy. I don't feel like I'm getting skatey on the edge of the tire. I feel like the bike is so much more planted, and personally as a rider, I feel so much more in control, which isn't a feeling that I've had on this new generation Yamaha. Like I said, with the Power Tuner app, I actually increased the power later on in the day, which, like I said, is something I would never do on the Yamaha. I was able to get all that feeling, all that fast torque feeling from the old bike, put it in the new bike, but just like I said, in an overall more controlled package, easier and more fun for me to ride over the longer course of a moto. Sometimes I feel like these new model changes aren't always that big a deal in a scope of the overall picture. You know, if you bought a 23, a 24, 25, maybe you got different suspension settings or different motor mounts. But for 26, I do feel like it's actually a big change simply because of this motor feeling. It's so much more controlled. I think it's going to cater to a wider variety of riders. And I think more people are going to feel more comfortable on this bike. These bikes are available now in dealers. I can't wait to hear what you guys think about riding one. If you have a hot take or you think something that I said was totally off, drop me a comment, hit the subscribe button, drop us a like. It really helps us make more cool videos like this. And always check out the Cycle News website where we drop a free digital magazine every Monday night. We have racing news, we have bike tests, everything that's going on in the racing world you can find at cyclenews.com for free. Thanks so much for watching. Thanks to Yamaha for getting us set up. And until next time, we'll see you guys out on the track.